The best place to begin your first day of touring in the city of Rome is, of course, the Colosseum, and it's pretty easy to get to. In fact, the underground has a stop on the line B called Colosseo. After leaving the underground, you will have to stand in line, very likely for about an hour, before buying your ticket. The ticket will allow you to enter the Colosseum and Palatine, but if you want to see the Alexamenos Graffito, you will have to pay an additional €3, so remember to ask about that. Now head up the stairs for a view of the Colosseum from the inside. People are often surprised to note that the seats are no longer present, and most of the platform of the Colosseum is missing, but you can see the galleries, cages, and elevators from underneath the platform. Remember that this structure was inaugurated in AD 80, and construction had begun only 10 years earlier. The Colosseum was funded with the spoils of the Roman general Titus, who's the same general who destroyed the city of Jerusalem and its temple, which means that part of the temple treasure funded the construction of the building most often associated with the martyrdom of Christians. Now, of course, people debate how many Christians were actually executed in the Colosseum. Executions of criminals often took place in the Circus Maximus instead, but definitely executions did take place in the Colosseum, and that would have included Christians at some point. Ignatius of Antioch is one name commonly considered to have been fed to the lions in the Colosseum. When you head downstairs, you'll see a cross with the writing, "By kissing this holy cross, you'll receive 1 year and so many days of indulgence." Now you're at the height of the platform, and you can see the underground tunnel that leads out of the Colosseum. The Colosseum had a series of tunnel systems which led either to the School of the Gladiators. The School of the Gladiators is located across the street and can't be seen from the Colosseum, but we have a picture for you to get an idea of what it looks like. While other tunnels were used to carry bodies out of the Colosseum after people died in the games. Now, it's important to underscore the fact that most games in the Colosseum didn't involve the killing of people, but were more for the hunting of animals or other displays of wealth and power. After leaving the Colosseum, you will go past the Arch of Constantine, which was built several hundred years later. Constantine is, of course, the emperor remembered for having legalized Christianity in the year 313, though he held on to the title Pontifex Maximus, abbreviated Pont Max, supreme pontiff over all temples in Rome until his death, and wasn't baptized until his deathbed. From the Arch of Constantine, you will head over to the Palatine Hill. This is the first and most important of the famous 7 hills of Rome. The other hills are kind of hard to see, given that they're not very tall and they're covered in buildings. The Palatine Hill is where the emperors had their residence. So, imperial buildings from Caesar Augustus, the Emperor Vespasian, and so on are all located here. You can also find a bathroom stop here with a very nice bathroom, which is important on these tours, and there are several fountains where you can get water as you're walking through the Palatine Hill. Now head over to the Palatine Museum, which is where you'll be able to see the Alexamenos Graffito if you paid the extra €3 fee. The Alexamenos Graffito is located in a gallery near the back of the Palatine Museum, so you need to walk in, make your way through the galleries, and look carefully for a white slab that has some scratches on it. The scratches on this slab are from over 100 years before the time of Constantine, and they depict a crucified man with a donkey's head, with another man in a gesture of worship. The writing, in poor Greek, says, "Alexamenos worships his God," and it's a good reminder of the sort of mockery that Christians faced during the first 2 centuries for worshipping a man who had been crucified, and a man so humble as to be associated with a donkey. These Christians, as I said, were often executed as common criminals in the Circus Maximus, which can be seen from the Palatine Hill if you have the time to walk over to the edge behind the Palatine Museum. Next, make your way down towards the Arch of Titus. The Arch of Titus was built to commemorate the general Titus. Titus, Vespasian, and Domitian were members of the Flavian dynasty, and Titus is the general who destroyed the city of Jerusalem. The inside of the arch commemorates the taking of the treasure from the temple, including the 7-branched candlestick or menorah, which was taken from the temple to Rome and later lost, probably during one of the invasions of Rome after the empire fell apart. Now you'll work your way down in the midst of the Roman forums. But if you take a detour off to the right, you'll get a chance to see the Basilica of Maxentius, or what's left of it. A basilica is a typical type of building that's shaped like a rectangle with a central nave and 2 aisles on the sides. These types of buildings were generally used by the emperors to highlight their power, but the structure was later adopted by the Catholic Church, and in fact there are 4 major basilicas in the city of Rome. St. Peter's Basilica is the most famous of these. You'll walk past several other important buildings, a temple of Romulus with very precious marble pillars and its original bronze doors, the location where the funeral pyre was built for Julius Caesar. In the distance you can see what's left of the Senate building from ancient Rome. But to continue our tour of sites of Christian interest, you will need to leave the forums by exiting off to the right. You'll now go onto a main street where remains of other forums, the forums of Trajan, for example, can be seen even further to the right. And as you're walking, don't forget to stop and take a look out towards the Mamertine prison, Carcere Mamertino. This is a dungeon that gives a very good idea of what dungeons in ancient Rome look like. Now, tradition is that Peter and Paul were held here, but it's not likely they actually were. Our tour continues with Trajan's column. The Emperor Trajan, in the year 110, started a massive persecution. The letters between Trajan and Pliny the Younger, one of his governors, letters 96 and 97, give a very good picture of how Trajan and Pliny treated and what they thought of the Christians, including descriptions of the reasons these Christians were tortured and executed. As you walk past the massive white monument known as the Tomb to the Unknown Soldier, or Altar to the Country, and Piazza Venezia, it's a good time to remember that fascist Rome, the time when these structures were built, was also a time of persecution for evangelical Christians. Our tour will then take you up to the Chiesa del Gesù, Church of the Gesù, which is where you can see the tomb of Ignatius Loyola. Ignatius Loyola is the founder of the Order of the Jesuits, and his tomb is particularly interesting because it dates to the time of the Catholic persecution of Protestants and depicts a young woman, religion, beating 2 old men, heresy and hatred, who are resting on the books of John Calvin and Martin Luther. Now, this sculpture was made just 40 years after the Pope had pushed for the massacre of the Waldensian Protestants in northern Italy, in the Piedmont. From the Chiesa del Gesù, you make your way over to Largo Argentina. This is the location where Julius Caesar was executed, and you can see the remains of several temples from ancient Rome. These are down below street level, so you can see how much erosion has built up over the years. and how much higher the current street level is than the ancient street level. Our final 2 stops will take you across the main street and up a narrow alley to the right to Piazza della Minerva, where you'll find one of the most ancient structures in Rome, an obelisk that actually comes from Egypt. This obelisk, which is resting on an elephant, was built by the Egyptian pharaoh Hofra, whom Jeremiah mentions by name in one of his prophecies, in Jeremiah chapter 44. And finally, of course, the tour has to include a look at the Pantheon, which was the ancient temple to all the gods. The first Pantheon was built about 30 years before Christ, but it was later rebuilt 100 years later after fire destroyed the original Pantheon. The second Pantheon has been in continuous use ever since it was built, so well over almost 2,000 years. The tour of the Pantheon closes this section of sites of general Christian interest, but you are now located near several other interesting sites. These include Piazza Navona, a large oval square which was originally an amphitheater, and that's the reason for this unusual shape for the square, and Piazza di Montecitorio, where the obelisk of Montecitorio, another obelisk from the time of Jeremiah, can be found. But if you're tired of touring, just make your way over to the main road, Via del Corso, which looks straight at the big white monument you crossed earlier, the altar to the country. Walk down towards the white monument in Piazza Venezia, and going to the left and then across the street quickly to the right, you'll find a bus that will take you back to Termini, Rome's central station. I hope you find this tour interesting, and remember to read up on all these sites because there's a lot more to be said for each of them.